Hello there and welcome to Laurence Plays Factorio Planetary Pioneers, and as I keep saying, we have over 30 science packs to find and produce and use in this game, and that means, well, there's a lot of science that we need to do, a lot of technology to run through and unlock and play with and find out. And one of the things I was asked to do in a previous stream series was talk about what science we've been doing, so those of you who are following along can get an idea of what exciting new technologies we've been unlocking. And so I'm going to try and go through these fairly quickly, because there's a lot of these that are going to be fairly standard, fairly vanilla, but I'll stop and talk a little bit more about some of the more exotic and unusual and modded ones as I go through. So first up, we did physical projectile damage 3 and also 4 and 5. These make your bullets do more damage. That's pretty standard. Oh, and we did weapon shooting speed 3, 4 and 5 as well, so that makes your guns fire faster. It's not quite as good as projectile damage because you don't get any extra sort of effectiveness against armour, and it uses more ammunition, but it does increase the amount of damage you can output per second. So, you know, it's useful, but it's not quite as nice as the damage upgrades. We got processing units. These are the blue circuits, and they are, well, they're very useful for making advanced technology, and they're really, really expensive because they take massive quantities of green circuits in order to make them. We're struggling with these a bit at the moment because, well, firstly we didn't have enough iron, and now we don't have enough copper, so yeah, we're not making them quite as quickly as we'd like to, but, you know, they're available, and that's allowed us to make rockets and other exciting stuff like that. We got worker robot upgrades to speeds 2 and 3, so these guys now buzz around a little bit more quickly, which is nice, because it's always interesting how whenever you start a new game of Factorio and finally unlock bots, they feel like they're going so slowly, because in your last game you probably had them moving much more quickly because you've done loads of these researches. Well, we're starting to make a bit of a dent on that now and make them move around a little bit more quickly, which is very nice. We developed the exoskeleton. That's a piece of equipment you can put into your armour to make you move around a little bit more quickly. That's nice. I don't know if our armour's really big enough to really be able to use any of these yet, but it's nice to know it's there and we'll have it eventually when we want it. Oh, however, on that subject, we did also do the power armour, so that gives you a larger equipment grid, and so maybe there is going to be room for some exoskeletons. I think I'm still wearing the modular armour because in order to get the roboports and stuff in there, but I haven't moved on to the power armour yet, so that's probably something I should do in the next stream. We developed the rocket silo, and apparently in order to research that you need to make 100 logistics robots, which is interesting. I guess because the silos are intended to be loaded by logistics bots, you kind of need to have the logistics bots to make the rocket silo actually useful. That feels like a big change from, not from vanilla, but from sort of the old 1.1 Factorio, where it was the end of the game, but now it's the beginning of things. I quite like the idea of having to do things in order to get researches, rather than just churn through science packs. So something like having to make 100 logistics robots, it's nice and different, so I kind of appreciate that. We got stronger explosives. That's a lot like the ammunition one I talked about earlier, but it makes your explodey weapons more powerful. I guess that's grenades. Maybe we wanted that for tree clearing purposes and that sort of thing, because I don't think we have rockets yet. But it does make our grenades more explosive and more powerful, so that's good. We increased the worker robot cargo size. This is less useful than it sounds. I mean, it's great for logistics bots because it means they can carry more stuff per bot, but it doesn't really make much difference with construction bots, and construction bots tend to be the bots I use more heavily because each construction bot will just have one task to do, so they'll fly out with one piece of belt or whatever, and so it doesn't really help all that much. It does if you're laying stone down or flooring down though, because then I think they will do larger areas of flooring from one bot, but for most of the stuff you build it doesn't actually make any difference, which is a little bit weird, but it does help with the logistics bots, and I think we're using them a bit more than I'm used to, so maybe there'll be some help from that. We've done a load of upgrades to the nanobot speed and the nanobot range, which I guess is quite nice. I don't know how much we're really using the nanobots at this point, but in theory it makes them a bit better, and they're cheap researchers that only take red and green, so I guess we just sort of churn through those to get them out of the list and tick them off. And it looks like now we've got to the maximum tech level of those. These are not infinite researches, so we've finished those. We can tick them off and move on with doing other researches. Now we're getting on to exciting stuff. We've researched space platform, and that means we can start making space platforms, or spaceships as we tend to call them, because that's functionally what they are most of the time, especially once you get the thrusters, which is the next research down here. And apparently you get that by sending a space platform starter pack to space. So I guess you unlock that. Yes, you unlock the space platform starter pack with the rocket silo. Then when you launch one of those, then you get the ability to start building Oh no, then you only get, then that only unlocks cargo bay. That's interesting. So I guess we technically could have built a space platform even without doing the research, although that would have been a little bit weird. And also we do need to get the thruster, so we wouldn't have got all that far with it. So immediately after that, we did in fact do the space platform thruster, and we've got the disco thrusters mod installed, which means they're nice and colourful, and they phase between colours as the ship flies along, which is jolly pretty, and adds a little bit of extra sparkle and fabulousness to the game. So yeah, we've added that in, and that means we can now actually have ships that move from one planet to another, and that's how Mike was able to build his little scout ship that took him all the way to Maluna. And at about that point, I guess we were starting to get a little bit worried by the biters, the enemies, and so on. So we ended up doing the Military 3, which doesn't really unlock anything particularly exciting. I mean, yes, you get the poison capsules and the slowdown capsules and the combat shotgun. Personally, I don't think I really ever use any of those. But, more importantly, it then unlocks all of these other things down here, which I shall talk about as we get to them in a few moments. And then, to everyone's relief, we then unlocked the full logistics system, which gets us the purple, blue and green chests, so we can now start using logistics bots properly and get the full power of the logistics system, using the little bots to take stuff around all over the place to wherever it's needed, rather than only being able to build stuff and sort of maybe sometimes kind of get bits and pieces to where you want them to go. And finally in Stream 4, we invented the tank. This sort of tank, not the fluid tank. And so, yeah, that's great. It allows us to drive around and sort of go out on the offensive against the biters. I think possibly the most useful part of this is going to be that we can now, because you can remote control vehicles in Factorio 2, this is going to allow us to clear up any enemies who are causing trouble remotely, even when there isn't anyone on the planet. So actually, given what I was talking about in the last video, we should probably try and get one of these over to Lignumus as soon as we can and get it deployed and ready to go out and clear things up if we have another crisis. And so that was the end of Stream 4. In stream number 5, we then Mike started building his spaceship, and because he put down a thruster, that meant we immediately researched thruster oxidizer. So that meant he was then able to look into and start making the one of the fuel, well, I say fuel types, the oxidizer to go with the fuel that goes into those thrusters. And then as soon as he made some of that, he was then told about making thruster fuel, which is made by dissolving rocket fuel in water. Don't ask, apparently that's how it works. And so he was then able to start, putting fuel into his thrusters and getting ready to go somewhere. It didn't take him long to start producing that, and 20 seconds later he discovered the moon of Maluna. So now we have access to this planet and we're able to fly out there and land on it and investigate it and poke at the rocks with a pointy stick and all of that sort of stuff. So this is our third planetoid that we've had to play with in this, after starting on Lignumus, getting to Norvis, and now we've escaped Norvis in a slightly more controlled manner than we escaped Lignumus and can head over to Maluna. And as you can see in the background, we've been working hard out on that moon to try and enable us to get a little bit further out into space. Then we finished off the train-related researchers for now with developing LTN. This allows us to start using stations in sort of the same way that you use red and blue chests with bots. So a station can request stuff and a station can offer stuff, and if there's a matching offer and request, then a train will automatically be dispatched to go over and get the things that are needed and take them to where they're going to be dropped off. I don't think we've actually started using this yet because Mark wanted to play around with his own version of it, but there's a couple of things that he hasn't been able to replicate, and so we're going to start using LTN at some point on Norvis. But we'll see. That's up to Mark exactly when he decides it's time to start doing so. We got inserter capacity bonus 3. That's great. It makes our stack inserters that little bit better. So we've gone from them being able to pick up +4 items to +5 items. I'm not sure what they start at off the top of my head. So maybe that's going from 6 to 7, or maybe it's going from 5 to 6. I'm not sure, but it's slightly better anyway, and it means our bulk inserters, not stack inserters, Laurence, bulk inserters, will run that little bit faster, and that's really good for unloading trains quickly. So there's a lot of train-focused stuff going on at this point. Next up was landmines. Now, I don't know whether we're actually going to use these very much. They are exactly as they sound. You put them on the ground, they blow up if an enemy walks over them, and they can be redeployed by construction bots automatically. So they're sort of a self-continuing weapon system, defensive system, if you get it set up properly. I've never really used them myself in normal play, so I don't know how effective they are, but they could be quite effective. We may find them fun to use. I guess we'll wait and see whether anyone decides they want to use them on their own planets. Next up was logistics network interfacing, and I don't know what this is. So it says here it interfaces with logistics networks to assign jobs, and you get a logistics network interface, which consists of a roboport, a combinator, and a radar. I don't know what this does. It's going to be very interesting to find out. So hopefully we'll have a play around with this at some point, and maybe it'll be very, very useful. It says it assigns jobs. Maybe, does that mean you can prioritize things for construction bots? Does it mean you can adjust requests? Or I don't know what this does. I'm looking forward to finding out. but it's yeah, it's a bit of a mystery, so that's something that's definitely going to be worth looking into. And it was about this point when Mike got things set up on Maluna and started doing things and testing things out and finding out what happened. So he managed to do the metallic asteroid crushing. So he must have mined up a metallic asteroid chunk from the ones on the ground, and then because he picked one up, that gave him the knowledge of how to crush it. So you put the rock in the crusher machine and it crushes it. Great. So now he knows how to do that. And literally 11 seconds later, he did the same thing with a carbonic asteroid chunk. So I guess it takes 11 seconds to mine one of these things by hand. And that tells you how to crush the carbonic rocks to get out carbon and coal and maybe some of your carbonic chunks back again. It also tells you how to use carbon as lubrication in an electric engine, which is quite interesting. And also tells you how to make thruster fuel out of carbon and water. So you learned quite a lot from picking up that rock. So well done there. That's going to be very, all of those are going to be very useful, particularly this one for space travel, this one for actually making electric engines on Maluna, and this one just for getting to that stage in the first place. Mike also picked up the oxide asteroid crushing, so you dig up one of these rocks and you learn how to pulverize it, and then you learn how to melt ice. So apparently, maybe if you make it warm, that'll help, I'm not sure. But anyway, Mike has learned about ice melting. And from then learning how to make ice, he's made 20 of those, and that's taught him all about oxygen. So this has allowed us to get turn thruster oxidizer into oxygen and water. So that's interesting. I'm not sure when that's going to be used, although actually that gives me that's an interesting thought, because I believe we can make thruster oxidizer from iron ore and water. And then if we can make oxygen from that, that could be quite useful for going into all of the sort of the wood growing systems we've got up here, because this does require oxygen. And is that the recipe I've been using? No, it's not the recipe I've been using. We've been electrolyzing water instead to make the oxygen. So maybe going via thruster fuel will be more efficient, more worthwhile, or maybe it's a bit of a sort of a red herring at this point, and it would be useful in space, but at the moment it's more useful on this planet to just do the electrolysis. I'm not sure. I think that needs looking into. It would take an additional input, so instead of just being water and then electrolyzing it, it would be water and iron ore to make the oxidizer, and then you get at least some of the water back, maybe all of the water back. I haven't looked at the chain yet, and then you get the oxygen out. So you're turning iron ore into oxygen instead of turning water into oxygen. I don't know. I wouldn't like to say which is better. But I think that is worthy of a bit more research, a bit more investigation. It also gets us the aforementioned electrolysis, so that's the one we have been using, turning water into oxygen and hydrogen, as you can see. And looking at these numbers, the oxidizer one is much faster. It's about 20 times faster, because instead of taking 2 seconds, it takes 0.1 seconds, and you get the same amount of oxygen out, and you get a little bit of water back as well, and you don't have to deal with the hydrogen. I don't know. I think it might be worth having a look, but it is going to mean turning iron ore into oxygen, which seems slightly odd. I don't know. We will see whether that seems worthwhile. We have learnt about pulling atmosphere out of the air and putting it into pipes, presumably. And as you can see down in the crafting surface conditions, you need to have a reasonable level of pressure, which means this will only work on places with an atmosphere, which seems to include space platforms. That's rather weird. I'm not sure about that one. But it allows you to pull in some atmospheric air and put it in a pipe for any processes that require that. We also develop oxygen, which can be extracted from said atmosphere. Not going to be much use on Maluna, but in some places we can pull the oxygen out of the air, so yes, great. And it appears to be about 20% of the amount of air you pull in, so that feels nice and real-worldy. And also, if you're on a planet with lots of carbon dioxide in the air, you can pull that straight out of the atmosphere as well. So that only works on Vulcanus. But should you need some carbon dioxide on Vulcanus, you can just literally pull it out of the... I was going to say pull it out of the air, but I guess if there's that much carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, yeah, I don't know if it really counts as air. This gives us quite a few recipes that aren't really relevant just yet. The atmospheric ones and the carbon dioxide ones, these aren't really relevant at the moment, but it's nice to have them unlocked and they're available for us to use when we need them. We have done mining productivity 2. That means each time a drill runs, you get slightly more resources out. That's nice. We have learned about modules. Modules are things you put in machines that give the machine a bit of a boost in one way or another. And going from there, we've developed speed modules that make machines work faster, but as it says, increase the energy consumption. That's standard and vanilla and normal, and we're used to those. Then there's efficiency modules, which they're not the opposite. They reduce the energy consumption of a machine, but don't actually have any negative effects, apart from taking up a valuable module slot that could be used for something else. Then you've got productivity modules. These are great because they give you free stuff. You uses a bit more power and the machine runs quite a lot more slowly, but you get more output for the number of inputs you put in. So if there's something you're a bit short of, like blue circuits perhaps, then you can get quite a lot more output out for the same amount of input. Things have become cheaper, and that's really nice. Then we have quality modules. This is something we've not really played with this in this game yet, but we'll probably look at later on in the future. So quality items are essentially they're better versions. So maybe they'll have more health, or if they're a vehicle, they'll go faster, or if they're an ammunition type, they'll do more damage, or if they're a weapon, they'll have slightly more range. That sort of thing. They make things slightly better in some way or another. And so this has unlocked quality levels 2 and 3 for us, and also the down binners, which are very useful chest things that allow you to drop things back down to quality level 1 or 2 if you don't actually have any use for quality 3 at the moment. And I found that's going to be really, really useful, because I found when I was playing my last run, I had so much stuff of a medium quality level that wasn't actually that useful, that being able to drop it back down to normal would have been extremely handy. I guess if it's a sort of a piece of glass that's of a very, very high quality, put a little bit of a scratch on it and that drops it down to a lower quality, and then you can use it in a process somewhere else. More excitingly though, we've developed the overclock module, and this is a new one from one of the mods. And as it says there, overclock modules, they're basically a productivity module, except you don't get the speed penalty. So you can put them in a machine, they'll carry on running at full speed, but still produce that free stuff I was talking about earlier. So that's great, because it takes away one of the major disadvantages of a productivity module. On the flip side, it uses even more power than a productivity module does. So you need to make sure your power generation is really spot on. You need to get huge amounts of power in order to be able to use these things. But if you can get them in your machines, they're enormously powerful, and they cost exactly the same as every other module to make. So they're just as cheap as all of the others, but they're that bit more powerful because they are functionally, as I say, they're functionally a productivity module, but without the speed penalty. But as I say, with more of an energy penalty. So there's some nice balance going on there, but these things are incredibly powerful. We've used a few of them in our rocket silos in an attempt to get our rockets up available quickly and cheaply. The power consumption has been manageable, but it's definitely quite noticeable. So we'll see how many of those we end up using, but I think we are going to be using them a lot. We developed the advanced boiler, and this is another one of those where you make some carbon and boom, you get a free boiler, which is lovely. And so these are designed for running on Maluna. There are boilers that can, as it says here, a boiler that can work in a zero oxygen environment, like Maluna and space platforms. So they're a way of sort of melting ice and doing other things out in space that you wouldn't normally be able to do, because other boilers require you to burn fuel in them, and you can't do that in space. Well, sort of. So that allows you to make the advanced boiler itself. It gets you the recipes for advanced water boiling, where this is the one where you put in some fuel and some oxygen and some water, and you get out steam and carbon dioxide. And that's proving quite useful because it's getting some of the carbon dioxide we need, although there are better recipes for doing that. Then there's the you can turn. What does this one do? So you can add in some atmosphere instead of the oxygen, and that's more or less the same sort of thing. So again, you've got some oxygen in the atmosphere to burn, and that will produce the carbon dioxide. And also methods of melting ice. You can do that with atmosphere or by pumping in oxygen. And in these, because the boiler is burning carbon or burning coal or something, that's why you need the oxygen in order to allow it to burn, and also why you can get some carbon dioxide out, and where the carbon comes for the carbon dioxide. I blanked on this one a little bit at first. I didn't realise they were fueled, so I was looking at that and going, this recipe doesn't make any sense. Where's the carbon coming from? But actually, because you're feeding in the fuel, it does. It makes perfect sense, and I'm quite happy with it. Similarly, you then get forced combustion, which is where you're just burning some of your fuel in the presence of some oxygen to generate carbon dioxide for when you actually want carbon dioxide, perhaps for growing trees, for example. And a similar one where we use atmosphere instead of oxygen, so these all come in pairs. You get the Space Crusher as well. Now this comes with a base quality, which is quite annoying. It always has the chance of chucking out some quality items, and I didn't want quality items at this point, so I'm very glad we've got the down binners. Otherwise we'd just be ending up with a chest full of medium quality rocks and stuff just coming out of these machines. So that would, or alternatively, we would have had to downgrade to some of the worst crushers, I guess. Also get a stone steam furnace. I thought we already had that from Lignumis, but maybe not. This is, I guess, a way of doing steam stone furnacey things down on the ground, and similarly with the steel one as well. So quite a lot of stuff from this advanced boiler research, and about half of it has been useful so far. Maybe we'll use more of it later on, we shall see. Unlocking the advanced boiler also then enabled us, because we've got the carbon dioxide, to then go on and discover wood cultivation. And this is where you produce some carbon dioxide, and then you can use your carbon dioxide and tree seeds and water to grow trees and get some wood. You can also do it an alternative way. What's this? Oh, this is the water saving method. So it takes twice as long, but uses half the amount of water. Otherwise, exactly the same. So if you're really short of water, you could use this one, but I don't think we have particularly, because water has not been something we've been short of. It also allows you to then turn wood into tree seeds, just in case you don't have that from lignumus, but I think we already did. At a similar sort of time, well, when we made 50 tree seeds, we're then able to vent off some of these excess gases. So if we had too much carbon dioxide, too much oxygen, or too much hydrogen, we can just vent those off into, not into atmosphere because there isn't one, but just vent them out. And at the moment, we are venting the hydrogen because we're generating quite a lot of oxygen from the electrolysis recipe from water. And so that means we end up with a load of hydrogen left over that we don't really have anything to do with. So we're just blowing that off into the into the not atmosphere and letting it drift away off the planet. It's hydrogen. It'll drift off into space pretty quickly because it doesn't weigh very much. Then things got a little bit more vanilla, so we developed lasers, we developed laser turrets, we did some laser shooting speeds, and we did some laser weapon damage researches. All of those basically to give us some laser turrets that are actually useful. I don't think we've actually started using them anywhere yet, but we have them available now, so if we decide we want them for our fortifications, we can start using them. And as I was saying in the last video, shipping some of those over to lignumus along with some solar panels to make the place a bit more self-sufficient and a little bit less dependent on trying to use wooden bullets, which aren't enormously effective, would probably go a long way. We unlock the discharge defense. This is a thing for zapping any nearby enemies and stunning them, pushing them back, and I don't know, I've not really used this. I tend to just go for, I reckon on going for more lasers and just trying to kill them before they get close enough and dangerous enough that the defenses are worth it. I'm not going to say I'm the best at Factorio combat, so it's quite possible that a good defense is the best defense, but generally I've found that a good defense tends to be the best defense. So it's not something I've done very much of, but maybe I should be. That's something I should probably look into and consider. And working through all of the things that Mike has been mining, I think the anorthite patch was a little bit further away from the rest of them, so it clearly came as a bit of an afterthought. But he went out there, he dug up one of those things, and that told him that he could put it in a crushing machine, and it would turn into alumina and maybe get his chunk back again. So, yay, that's another material for us to play around with. We can start looking at aluminium. But first, we developed the personal laser defense. So this is a laser, you can put it in your armor, it'll zap anything you get near. Great. As soon as Mike managed to crush some of that anthracite, he then got some alumina, and that unlocked this one, which tells him about alumina crushing. So you take your anorthite, you crush it to alumina, and then you crush the alumina again to get crushed alumina, and then you can cook the crushed alumina to get aluminium plates out. Good. Okay, so that's getting us down the chain here. And this is slightly out of sequence, but I'm now going to take a quick look at the aluminium processing, because he did that as well fairly soon after, and that allows you to turn aluminium plates into electrical cables and also into low density structures with some steel and some plastic. So at this point, the aluminium is pretty much becoming a replacement for copper on this planet, at least in some of the more basic recipes. So you can make the cable out of it, and it's not called copper cable anymore because apparently it's now electrical cable, and that means you can then use that to start making the basic electronics, so things like green circuits and so on. All of the things that use the basic cables, you can then make them from aluminium, and that's been quite useful out here. It did occur to me that I reckon if you recycle these electrical cables, you'll get copper back. So potentially we could have a supply of copper on this planet in a slightly dirty, hacksy way by making lots and lots of electrical cable out of aluminium and then recycling it so it turns back into copper. I feel it's a little bit dodgy, but if we need an emergency supply of copper once we've got far enough on to get the recycling systems, maybe we could do that? I don't know. Tell me if you think that'd be cheating. It certainly sounds a bit cheaty, so maybe we shouldn't do that. Then, the foraging party out on Maluna managed to make some wood, and making wood allowed us to unlock the sealed greenhouse that grows wood, and the tree that goes into the sealed greenhouse that grows wood to allow it to grow wood. And the greenhouse is one of those buildings that does a recipe that can be done in other machines, but does it incredibly quickly. So instead of growing trees in a chemical plant, which takes like 5 minutes or so to grow a small number of trees, you can instead do this in the wood-growing greenhouse, and that runs at a speed of 10, so instead of taking 5 minutes, it takes half a minute, and that's much better, and is going to allow us to actually start growing wood at a decent rate out here on Maluna. However, making these does require 100 trees, and making a tree requires, well, as we discussed before, it takes 300 seconds in a chemical plant, so it takes you quite a long time to build up your first 100 trees in order to make your first greenhouse, but once you've got that, you can then quite quickly start to sort of spiral and expand, and everything just sort of explodes outwards. It goes much, much faster. So getting your greenhouses up and running is extremely important, and I'm very glad that we had. And now it means things run much more quickly, much more nicely, and making your second and your third and your fourth greenhouses is actually really, really quick. Next up, we discovered wood gasification process, and that was done by mining a lunar rock, which gets you some sulfur and some stone, apparently. So that seems like an odd way to unlock it, but sure, I guess it's part of the just go around and do things on Maluna, and then you'll learn about stuff, learn about the place, and learn about stuff. And so that allows us to then turn cellulose into petroleum gas. And petroleum gas, as you're probably aware, is incredibly useful for making stuff like plastic and everything that comes on from there, and I suppose you can burn stuff with it as well, and it's generally very, very useful. And then you can make the solid fuel from diluted bitumen, and then yes, as you see, we can make plastic from cellulose, but that requires petroleum gas as well. Where's the cellulose coming from? Here we go. You take wood, you crush the wood, and then you dissolve the crushed wood with sulfuric acid, and you get some cellulose out of it, which can then be fed back into all those earlier recipes we were talking about. And that's probably why you discover this after you've mined a lunar rock, because that's where you get the sulfur from in order to make the sulfuric acid to dissolve the crushed wood. So, okay, I take it back. It does make sense, because you don't want to have any of these recipes before you can really make them. So it needs to encourage you to go out and learn about those things in order to start producing them. We also learn about the ALICE propellant process, so aluminium ice rocket propellant, apparently it's called. Oh, I see. AL ice, so Alice. Yep, I see where the name comes from. Very good. So that allows you to turn aluminium and ice and water into rocket fuel, which you can then dissolve in water to make the rocket fuel required for the space platforms. So this is going to be our way of making rocket fuel on Maluna, which is going to be quite useful because we're going to need to launch rockets, and we'd rather not have to ship it all in from another planet. So that's great. And along with, well, eventually I guess we'll be able to make blue circuits, because we can make green circuits. Red circuits are basically green circuits and plastic, and a bit more of the aluminium cable. And then blue circuits are red and green circuits and sulfuric acid, and as we've seen, we can already make sulfuric acid, so that means we can make the blue circuits here. We're also going to be able to make the low density structures, because we've got the aluminium recipe for that, which requires steel, but we've got iron, so we can make steel. That shouldn't be too difficult. And also it's going to need plastic, and we've got the petroleum gas and the bitumen, and cellulose, so we can make the plastic as well for that. So yes, we are going to be able to make all of the ingredients for a rocket on this planet, so we should be able to escape from just the resources on this planet. And I like that about most of the space age planets, is that they're designed so you can land on them with absolutely nothing, and then scrape it together, and then scrape and scrape and scrape, and eventually you have everything you need to make a rocket to get you back up to your spaceship, to go back to where you came from and go, oh, thank goodness, let's not go to that place again. It is a silly place. Although actually no, we're going to discover some resources out here that we need, I'm sure. But you know, we'll work towards that. We're getting near the end now, but one of the next ones we found is ore crushing productivity, which gives us a bonus on every time we crush an ore in order to get the powdered or the crushed ore out of it. These will give us little bonuses on it, so instead of having a 10% bonus from the crushing, we get it now up to a 15% bonus, and that means we're getting that bit more resource out of everything we mine. So that's going to be really nice, really useful. It's going to mean we don't need to do quite as much mining to get all the resources we need in the factory. We've done a lab research speed upgrade. Now, research speed upgrades, I mean, they're nice because, okay, sure, your labs run that bit faster. You don't need to have quite as many labs to get the research done. But the limiting factor on research is always making the science packs. So lab research speed, it's nice to have, but it doesn't really matter. You could just chuck down a couple of extra labs and get the same sort of output. Still, we'll do them because they're there, and it's nice to have. But a lab productivity research is much, much nicer and much better, and yeah. So these ones are, yeah, sure, why not? But they're not the most exciting of the researches we do. And then in Stream 6, we did another one of those to get even faster. Some more of the nanobot range and speeds, which I talked about earlier. We got the defender bots that follow you around and shoot things a little bit, and the distractor bots that come around and and again, they follow you around, and no, they don't. These don't follow you apparently. They just sort of sit around annoying enemies a little bit and distracting them, so you can go over and shoot their nests instead. Personally, I prefer to use Mike for that because he's slightly more intelligent than the bots, and will aggro them, the biters slightly more effectively. Much more excitingly was developing rockets and a launcher to shoot them with. This is it's a more powerful weapon. I was going to say it's explosive. It does explosive damage, but actually it doesn't do area of effect. It doesn't do splash damage like the next one that we did, the explosive rocketry does. So it's not quite. It's a sort of a different sort of effective. It does more damage, but without the sort of but not to an area. So it's going to be good for taking out biter nests, I guess. So maybe it'd be worth sticking a few of those in our in our arsenal as well. And then finally, and probably most excitingly, we developed the Space Science Pack. And so this is our next science pack that we're going to be developing out on Maluna. And that takes in, what does it take? Well, we can now make Space Science Packs. It requires ice, iron plate, glass and carbon. None of those are particularly difficult. So the ice comes from digging up the oxide asteroid chunks and then crushing them. You get the ice, easy. Iron plate comes from the metallic ones. You crush them, you get iron ore. You cook it, you get iron plates. Nice. It's glass, there's some stone in there as well. You crush that down to sand, cook the sand, you get glass. That I think is an addition from the vanilla recipe, but it's not a particularly difficult one. And then carbon comes from just crushing the carbonic asteroid chunks. So this is going to be getting the actual science packs themselves is going to be really, really easy. It's getting all of the rest of the infrastructure to allow you to get them off Maluna that is the challenging part, and that's what we've spent all of our time doing so far. But now we've got to here, we're ready to actually start making these things, and as soon as we have, we can start shipping them back over to Norvis as well and doing science with them. So that's going to be, as I say, another place where we're going to need to get the rocket infrastructure up and running and able to ship things out. But once we get to that point, we'll be able to do another science, so that's going to be really nice, and might only be another couple of streams off. I wouldn't like to say. It's there's quite a lot that needs to be done before we can ship it out, but at least we can now make it. And so that gets you caught up. That's all of the research we've done up to the end of stream number 6 on the 14th of July. So I hope that's been interesting. Please make sure you're subscribed to the channel so you don't miss out on any further videos coming out every Thursday and Friday. And the streams, of course, on Mondays at 7:30 PM UK time. And also keep an eye out for the Foundry streams on Wednesday. Foundry is a sort of a cross between Factorio and Minecraft, and I'm really enjoying playing it, so come along and check that out as well. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you then. Bye bye.